"Mom, the best gift would be your death." My son David announced those exact words to 18 witnesses sitting around my dining room table. The clinking of silverware against porcelain came to a sudden, absolute halt. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I looked across the roasted turkey, the bowls of mashed potatoes, and the cranberry sauce I had spent all morning preparing. David sat there with a straight face, a piece of bread halfway to his mouth. Next to him, his wife Sarah didn't gasp. She didn't reprimand him. Instead, the corner of her mouth twitched upward into a faint, unmistakable smirk. The rest of the family, Sarah's parents, her cousins, and a few mutual friends, stared at me in horrified silence. They waited for the explosion. They waited for the tears, the screaming, the typical motherly heartbreak. I just smiled. I placed my linen napkin neatly beside my plate, looked directly into David's eyes, and calmly replied, "Is that so?" I didn't wait for his answer. I pushed my chair back the wood, scraping softly against the hardwood floor, and walked out of the dining room. I stepped into my home office, quietly shutting the heavy oak door behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. At 65, I had lived through too much to let a spoiled 30-year-old boy break me. I picked up my phone and made exactly one phone call. It lasted less than 3 minutes. I spoke to a representative from the utility company, a task I had been meaning to do for weeks, but had held off on giving my son one last chance to prove he was still a decent human being. Then I opened my laptop and clicked on the smart home application that controlled the house. I made a few quick adjustments to the settings. 2 hours later, David would start panicking. But for now, I simply took a deep breath, smoothed my blouse, and walked right back into the dining room. When I returned to the table, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a carving knife. Sarah's mother was staring at her plate, pushing peas around with her fork. David looked slightly flushed, perhaps realizing the weight of what he had just said in front of a live audience. I sat back down, picked up my fork, and casually took a bite of stuffing. The turkey turned out quite well this year. I noted my voice, perfectly steady. Sarah let out a nervous little laugh. "Megan, you know David was just joking. He has a dark sense of humor. He just means, well, you know the housing market is tough and inheriting this place would be a lifesaver." "I understand completely," I replied. I didn't elaborate. I didn't demand an apology. I just kept eating. The next 2 hours were excruciating for them. The guests tried to force small talk, discussing the weather, sports, anything to fill the heavy silence. I participated politely, offering warm smiles to Sarah's relatives. David kept glancing at me, waiting for the lecture. He was passive, always had been easily manipulated by Sarah's pragmatic, cold worldview. He expected me to pull him aside and beg for his affection. I did no such thing. I simply checked my watch. At exactly 7:01 p.m., the lights in the dining room flickered once and died. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The Wi-Fi router on the credenza went dark. "What happened?" David muttered, standing up in the pitch black. He pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight. "Did a breaker trip?" "No," I stated, standing up and retrieving my purse from the side table. I had the power and internet shut off. The accounts are in my name and I no longer require them. Sarah scoffed from the darkness. "Megan, turn it back on." "My family is still eating dessert. You can eat it by candlelight," I suggested. "I'm leaving." To understand how we ended up eating turkey in the dark, you have to look back 8 months. That was when David and Sarah first moved into my 4-bedroom house. They claimed they were trying to save for a down payment on their own place. As a widowed mother, I wanted to help my son. I gave them the entire 2nd floor. Within a week, Sarah began acting like the lady of the manor. She rearranged my kitchen cabinets, throwing away my vintage baking pans because they didn't match her aesthetic. When I asked where my things were, she rolled her eyes and muttered that I was hoarding useless junk. They didn't pay rent. They didn't contribute to the groceries. Sarah expected me to clean up after them, leaving her dirty coffee mugs on the coffee table and her laundry piled in the hallway. I never yelled. I don't believe in wasting energy on arguments that go nowhere. Instead, I established firm, silent boundaries. I stopped washing their dishes. If a dish was left in the sink for more than a day, I carefully placed it inside a plastic bin and set it outside their bedroom door. When Sarah complained that she had no clean plates, I simply pointed to the bin. I bought a small mini fridge for my own bedroom and kept my premium groceries there. I cooked strictly for one. When they came downstairs expecting dinner, they found me quietly reading a book, a single empty plate, in the dishwasher. David tried to guilt-trip me. Mom Sarah works long hours. Could you just make a little extra? I'm retired, David, I answered, not looking up from my novel. I retired from working, and I retired from raising children. You know how to use a stove. They hated that. They wanted a free maid and a free house. I gave them neither. The real friction started when they realized my bank accounts weren't an extension of theirs. My late husband and I had lived sensibly, paying off the house and building a comfortable nest egg. Sarah, however, assumed my money was just sitting there waiting to fund her lifestyle. 2 months before Thanksgiving, David sat me down in the living room. Sarah stood behind him, resting her hands on his shoulders like a puppeteer. Mom, we want to do a minor remodel on the upstairs bathroom, David began. We got a quote for $20,000. We were hoping you could cover it. Think of it as an investment in your own property. I looked at the estimate paper he slid across the coffee table. I didn't even pick it up. The upstairs bathroom functions perfectly. The plumbing is sound. But it's dated, Sarah chimed in. The tiles are from the 90s. It's depressing. Then keep your eyes closed when you shower. I suggested taking a sip of my tea. I am not spending $20,000 on aesthetic upgrades. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. Mom, you have the money. You're just sitting on it. What else are you going to use it for? There it was. The entitlement. The assumption that my life was over and my only remaining purpose was to act as their ATM. My finances are my business, I stated clearly. The next morning, I drove to the bank. I removed David as an authorized user on the emergency credit card I had given him years ago. I rented a safe deposit box and moved all my valuable jewelry, the deed to the house, and my important documents out of the house. I didn't say a word to them about it. I just prepared. Back in the dark dining room on Thanksgiving, panic was beginning to set in. David followed me out to the hallway, his phone flashlight casting wild shadows against the walls. Mom, what are you doing? You can't just turn off the power with a house full of people, he demanded. I walked into my bedroom and pulled my pre-packed suitcase from the closet. I had packed it the night before. Call it a mother's intuition, but I knew Sarah's decision to invite her entire family to my house for the holiday was going to end in disaster. I can do whatever I please with my accounts, David, I replied, rolling the suitcase toward the front door. Sarah stomped down the stairs, furious. This is ridiculous. Turn the lights back on, Megan. You are ruining Thanksgiving. I believe David ruined Thanksgiving when he wished for my death. I corrected her, pausing at the front door. I am simply giving him a preview of what happens when I am no longer around to provide for him. I reached into my purse and pulled out 2 printed confirmation sheets. I handed them to David. He shined his light on them. These are the transfer notices for the water, electricity, and internet, I explained. They are no longer in my name. The utility companies will require a new deposit and a credit check to turn them back on. Since neither of you have steady credit right now, you might want to start making phone calls on Monday. David stared at the papers, his mouth slightly open. Where are you going? Away, I answered. I opened the front door, stepping out into the crisp November air. I didn't look back as I walked to my car, loaded my suitcase into the trunk, and drove away, leaving them standing in the dark. I drove across town to a quiet, modest neighborhood pulling into the driveway of a small blue house. The porch light was on, welcoming me. Before I even reached the steps, the door swung open. My niece Emma stood there wrapped in a thick cardigan. She was my late sister's daughter. Unlike David, Emma had worked for everything she owned. She was a high school teacher, humble kind, and she actually called me just to ask how my day was. "Aunt Megan," she smiled, stepping aside to let me in. "The guest room is ready. I made chamomile tea." "You are a blessing, Emma," I sighed, stepping into the warmth of her home. We sat at her small kitchen table. I didn't cry on her shoulder. I simply drank my tea and opened my laptop. It was time to make the invisible changes that would solidify my future. I logged into my primary investment portal. The screen glowed, displaying the retirement accounts and mutual funds my husband and I had built over 40 years. For 3 decades, David's name had sat in the payable on death beneficiary box. It was a default setting, a mother's blind faith. I clicked the edit button. I deleted David's name. I typed in Emma's legal name, entered her social security number from a file I kept, and clicked save. I did the same for my checking and savings accounts. No complex paperwork, no dramatic readings of a will. Just the quiet clicking of a mouse in a warm kitchen. In less than 10 minutes, I had entirely rerouted my legacy. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, washing her mug in the sink. "Everything is perfectly fine," I answered, closing the laptop. In fact, for the first time in a year, I feel completely in control. The next morning, my phone buzzed incessantly. I sat on Emma's porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the autumn leaves fall. I picked up the phone. 7 missed calls from David. 12 text messages from Sarah. "The food in the fridge is going bad. David's phone is dying. We can't charge anything. You need to fix this right now." I ignored the texts. Instead, I opened the smart home application on my phone. When I installed the digital lock on my front door 2 years ago, David had mocked me, saying I was too old to figure out the technology. But I read the manual. I knew exactly how it worked. I checked the status. The door was currently unlocked. They had likely gone out to buy coffee and charged their phones in their cars. I tapped the screen. Lock door. Then I went into the user settings. I deleted David's fingerprint profile. I deleted Sarah's PIN code. I changed the master code to a random sequence of numbers and disabled the backup physical key feature. The house was completely sealed. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was David. This time, I answered. "Mom, the door won't open. The keypad is flashing red." "Did you change the code?" He sounded frantic, the wind whipping in the background. "Yes, I did," I replied evenly. "Unlock it. We're freezing out here, and Sarah needs her laptop for work." "You wanted my death, David," I reminded him. "If I were dead, you wouldn't be able to call me to unlock the door. Consider this a training exercise. Mom, stop playing games. Let us in. It is not a game," I stated. "You do not live there anymore. You have lost your privileges." I hung up the phone and blocked his number. I had not been sitting idle during the months David and Sarah mistreated me. I had seen the writing on the wall. A few weeks prior, I had reached out to a real estate investment firm, the kind that buys houses, as is, for cash. They didn't require staging repairs or open houses. They just wanted the land and the structure. I opened my email. The final purchase agreement was waiting in my inbox. I called the representative, a sharp young man named Carter. "Good morning, Carter. I am ready to move forward with the offer." "Great to hear, Megan," he said enthusiastically. "Just to confirm, the property will be vacant at closing." "No, I corrected him. As we discussed, I am selling it occupied. There are 2 unauthorized occupants currently residing on the property. They have no lease and pay no rent. Right. The squatter situation. Our company deals with that all the time. We'll just factor the eviction cost into the final payout. It drops the offer by about 5%. Are you okay with that? I consider it a convenience fee, I answered. He emailed over the DocuSign link. I didn't need a middleman. I didn't need drawn-out negotiations. I read the contract, signed my name digitally on the screen, and hit submit. The title company would process the cash wire by Tuesday. Just like that, the house I had lived in for 30 years was gone. I felt no sadness. A house is only a home when there is respect inside it. Without that, it's just drywall and wood carrying the weight of ungrateful ghosts. I closed the email feeling lighter than I had in years. By Sunday afternoon, David and Sarah had figured out where I was. Emma's address wasn't a secret. They pulled into the driveway, slamming their car doors. I saw them coming from the kitchen window. I asked Emma to stay inside. I stepped out onto the porch, leaving the screen door locked between us. Sarah was vibrating with rage. "You psycho! We've been sleeping in our car. We had to break a window to get our clothes. Then the new owners will send you the bill for the broken glass," I noted calmly. David looked exhausted, his hair greasy, his eyes wild. New owners. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I sold the house." "David, the transaction is complete. An investment firm owns the property now. If you go back there, they will treat you as trespassers." He gripped the wooden railing of the porch. "You sold my inheritance? You sold the house we were supposed to raise our kids in. Because of one stupid joke at Thanksgiving." "It wasn't a joke," I corrected him, looking deep into his eyes. "It was the truth. You value my assets more than my heartbeat. You wanted the gift of my death. I decided to give you the reality of my absence instead." "You're leaving us with nothing," Sarah screamed, pointing a finger at me. "We have no savings. We have nowhere to go. You have 2 working bodies and college degrees," I replied. "You'll figure it out." I pointed to 3 large cardboard boxes stacked at the edge of the driveway. "I had a moving crew pack the rest of your personal belongings before the sale closed. Take them and do not return to this property." I turned my back on them, walked inside, and locked the solid wooden door. 6 months later, my life looked entirely different. The cash from the sale of the house had cleared, sitting securely in accounts that bore Emma's name as the sole beneficiary. I bought a beautiful sunlit 2-bedroom condo just 10 minutes away from Emma's house. It was perfect. No stairs to climb, no massive yard to maintain, and most importantly, no ungrateful children stomping around the upstairs hallway. Emma came over twice a week. We cooked together, drank wine, and talked about her students. She never asked me for a dime, which is exactly why I quietly paid off her student loans as a Christmas gift. She cried for an hour when she found out. Those were the kind of tears I valued. David predictably struggled. Without free housing and my credit card to fall back on, reality hit him hard. He texted me occasionally from a new number. The messages were always a mix of pity and subtle requests for help. "Mom, rent is so high here. Sarah and I are really stressed. Can we just talk?" I read the message while sitting on my balcony, watching the morning sun hit the potted geraniums I had just planted. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound sense of peace. I pressed the delete button on the message and blocked the new number. I am not a victim. I am a mother who loved her son enough to give him exactly what he asked for a life completely independent of me. I picked up my coffee mug, taking a slow, warm sip. The air was quiet. My home was my own. And for the first time in a very long time, I was genuinely excited to see what tomorrow would bring. If there's one thing I've learned from this entire ordeal, it's that setting boundaries doesn't require screaming matches, endless debates, or trying to convince someone of your worth. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply quiet, decisive action. I realize that being a mother doesn't mean I have to be a martyr, and unconditional love shouldn't be a blank check for disrespect. We teach people how to treat us by what we choose to tolerate. The moment I decided my tolerance for their behavior had expired, my life truly became my own again. If you're watching this, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. How would you have handled David and Sarah if it were your own home? Would you have done the same thing or handled it differently? Let me know down below.